Hello, George here. I'd like to talk to you about a really long movie I saw, which is War and Peace. This was the one made in the 60s by Sergei Bondarchuk in Russia. At the time, Russia was an atheist country. It was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, and they were just they were very communist, very atheistic, and anti-religion, really, right? And one day, they have a famous author called Leo Tolstoy, which wrote this novel, War and Peace, uh, which was written, well, it was back in the 1800s when that was written, I think. And then it's basically a story about a historical novel about the Napoleonic Wars and about history in general, and about it has love and betrayal and all sorts of stuff in it. It's a wonderful novel. It's, I think, the best novel ever written. You know, on this Russian. And now, here's a story, right? The Americans made a movie called War and Peace, which is an adaptation of that novel, and they made it in the very in a very epic style. It's not a bad movie, but it was a very Hollywood style, and it was not really very faithful to the messages of the author. It's a typical Hollywood epic movie, and it really didn't do justice to the novel, I think. Uh, so the Russians, or the USSR, of course, there was this Cold War, and they didn't want to be upstaged by the Americans. So what they did is they made their own version, and it was on such a grand scale. I mean, there were thousands of soldiers that were sort of recruited in as extras to simulate the Napoleonic battles. And what's more is that when they made this movie, they actually faithfully reproduced the Christian themes in Tolstoy's novel, even though they were an atheistic country, just so that they could make the best and Tolstoy adaptation of War and the best adaptation of War and Peace ever in history. And this they succeeded. There have been many miniseries after this that were made by various production companies recently, but I think the Sergei Bondarchuk's War and Peace in the 60s is the best, the most faithful, and captures the essence of what Leo Tolstoy was trying to convey. So there, I won't, of course, I won't give away the plot points. This is a must-see movie, right? Unfortunately, I don't think it's very easy to get in DVD or in Blu-ray. It's available in on YouTube. Uh, in fact, when the Soviet Union broke up, their film industry was in disarray, and this movie was in poor shape. It was sort of rotting in some warehouse and forgotten, and it needed to be restored. And I think there was a DVD restoration, but now recently I seen there is actually an HD restoration, and it's the HD version that is in YouTube at the moment, and I'm going to put a link to that below. So what are some of the Christian themes that are present in War and Peace? Well, yes, it's amazingly has a very Christian theme. It basically shows in a not an in-your-face way, but in a subtle way, the reaching hand of God in the events of history and in our personal lives. Each character, and there are many characters in this film, and more in the novel. The film could not do justice to all of the characters in the novel. I do suggest you read the novel too. The characters have all their arcs. The ones who are the protagonists or the good guys, and the antagonists, the bad guys. They all have their arcs. Either they reached and find God, being originally atheistic, or they continue in their own worldly way and meet the end that is suitable for them, but not in an unhandy way. A lot is left to the intelligence of the viewer to discern what is going on behind the scenes in the hearts of each of the characters. Another theme that is also there, which is, I don't know whether it's Christian, but it's this idea that history is not really governed by the actions of individual powerful people, which is the traditional way of looking at history, where you have kings and emperors and or generals, and these characters define the movements of history. But in fact, Tolstoy has a very different view of history, which I think is a very Christian one, that history is not defined by the action of heroic historical figures, but history is defined by the day-to-day life of individuals, especially, and it's this mass of individual decisions and trends that define history, define whether a country wins a war or loses a war. And it's not specifically stated even in a novel, but you do know that God interfaces with us at an individual level. And through, especially the church, is the impact on history by the church is done by us individuals as Christians, impacting our own surroundings, our own sphere of influence. And it is through the church and God, that God interacts and weaves history, really. So you'll see how the church influences subtly. It's not really very expositional here. You can see how it does, how prayer affects things, and how God and allows God to participate in history. At the same time, it's full of interesting characters. There is romance, there is rivalry. And before I forget, this is probably the best filmed battle scene ever of the Napoleonic battles. What they actually did is they recreated the actual battlefield, and with the actual soldiers dressed up in traditional uniforms and marching against each other. Nowadays, this would be done by CGI, but there was no CGI then. I don't think this will ever be made like this again. And it's a spectacle to behold. I don't think they'll ever make anything like this again. They'll probably CGI it. But no, these were real people, thousands of people marching against each other, and really gloriously shown, and amazing battle scenes, and amazing, lovable characters. I mean, the romance in this story is incredible, and not a typical. You'd never know who ends up with who. That's the big. There's nice twists in this story. I wonder. You ask yourself in the beginning, in the romance section of the romance section of this, who do you think is going to end up with who? And the film does give hints. You will be surprised. Okay, so must see War and Peace. A Christian film made by an atheistic regime. That the existence of the film alone is a miracle. All right, George, signing off. And take care of this pandemic. Chill. Be close to God. God is in control. And God wins. Bye-bye. Till next time.